Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and this is our series focused on the show Obi-Wan Kenobi, called Calling on Kenobi. And with me for this and all of our other episodes that we recorded is Alex Kane. Welcome back, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
This was our series finale, at least as far as we know. We'll get into that probably at the end as a conversation, a little hot topic. But wow, this episode, what did you think?
It hit me emotionally at least as hard as anything Star Wars live action since Revenge of the Sith, I would say. You know,
wow.
I think it really was emotional for me in a really fulfilling way. I think that, of course, it's playing a lot of the same notes that The Last Jedi played, but seeing that again and having these things, you know.
Motifs, similar motifs. Yeah.
There was just a lot of the things that I loved about the Star Wars of old and the Star Wars of recent years kind of all came together in this really beautiful operatic way. And the finale felt sort of the most like a movie, I guess. You know, it was a little longer, had some really very George Lucas style, you know, like confrontations, and got into some fun imagery where, you know, it's like, where are we right now? And it's like, you know, there's layers of the very Dark Night of the Soul kind of stuff. And you know, it was just so much fun. You know, it's a monster movie. It's a tragedy. It's a happy ending. It feels like this weird reversal of Revenge of the Sith where you see like all those horrors sort of played out again, the Anakin's tragedy and everything. But then you get this really hopeful note, you know, kind of like when Luke is passed off to Owen and Beru in the prequel trilogy. But yeah, I found it really fulfilling, and I loved the performances by everybody pretty much. So
yeah, I said on Twitter, Obi-Wan Kenobi is exceptional. The show is exceptional, and it's the most valuable thing that Star Wars has done since The Last Jedi. And I really stand by that, because and there's this Bell Hooks quote that I really wanted to talk about, because it does a lot of things and reinforces points that I have made on this show and I've talked about many, many times. But I really wanted to say this quote because it really sums up how anti-dominator culture the entire show kind of ends up being. And that is that it reconnects Obi-Wan Kenobi with his feelings and his, like, basically integrity. And Bell Hooks says, the quest for integrity is the heroic journey that can heal the masculine crisis and prepare the hearts of men to give and receive love. And Obi-Wan was so broken by what happened with Anakin and Padme and that tragedy that he himself put himself into a purgatory. And it's like how Obi-Wan got back on path, right? And there's so much interesting imagery, symbolism, and important pieces that have laid the groundwork in this episode to hopefully give somebody else the hope that if you're at your lowest point, you can get out of that. It's not the end if you are at your lowest point. I think that that's the biggest takeaway from this episode specifically, because he gets to his lowest point. He literally hits it, gets buried, and then is reborn. And that's so cool. Yeah.
He's sort of working like a job out in the desert, you know, kind of just working 9 to 5 and then going home to his little pet Eopie, his mount, and then nothing else really going on for Obi-Wan. And then, Leia says, you look kind of old and beat up. And then, by the end of the show, he is kind of like her hero outside of like her parents. Like he's kind of he's back to sort of his old self, but like a better version of his old self. And he smiles and laughs,
Yeah. And that's literally like he comes to terms with everything that he's been through. And I'm going to talk about that through the course of the show. But before we get into that, I do want to say, like, Deborah Chow has done an amazing job, and we've talked about it a lot in the framing of certain scenes, in the feel of how the camera works and everything like that, as well as like just the execution, right? Because the director is in charge of the execution of the show. That's really, really important. But I wanted to spend some time, and I asked Alex to help pull together some just information on the writers of the show, because the writers are the ones that get the themes and inject those into how the show is created. And so the fact that we had a mining planet and we have that opposite, the analogy of farming repeated, is really important from a symbolism perspective. And that wasn't Deb, that was the writers. So I really want to like call them out and give them the justice that they deserve, which is like, you guys did an amazing job of pulling this together. And it feels like in so many ways, like when I think about it, I'm like, well, yeah, this writes itself. I did a speculation episode where I told you exactly thematically and like stepwise what he needs to go through. Yeah, but they did it and made it satisfying and made me worry for characters that I already knew where they would be. And that's brilliant. That is brilliant execution with Deb, of course, helming the ship, right? So let's dig into those writers.
Yeah, so there was sort of the first wave of, they had the writing duo of Stuart Beatty and Hossein Amini were sort of the first pair of writers who worked on scripts and formed like probably a writer's room of some kind. And they mostly have story by credits on the show, so they contributed significant elements and their contracts specified probably certain things. But so they end up getting like some screenplay credits, I think, toward the end, but mostly it's like a story by situation. So then toward the end, they brought in like Joby Harold and Hannah Friedman, Andrew Stanton. And sort of like those three did the more like the final versions of the screenplay after they reworked them, and the episode count changed over time and as they were
I think they were originally planning on having 8 episodes and then it was reduced down to 6.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah.
Now, Stuart Beatty, I thought that sounded familiar, and I looked it up, and he wrote Collateral, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And so the funny thing about me is, like, if people ask, like, what movie got you into film, my answer is basically Attack of the Clones, Scarface, and Collateral. Like, Collateral at, like, 14, 15 in the movie theater, like, blew my mind to the same extent that Attack of the Clones did. And it stars Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, Jada Pinkett Smith, directed by the legendary Michael Mann. It's basically 2 men journeying through the criminal underworld of nighttime Los Angeles, which kind of sounds like Vader and Obi-Wan in a story sense. These 2 sort of opposites coexisting in this very, metaphorical landscape. Hossein Amini is famous for having written the screenplay for Drive, a 2011 crime drama / heist movie. Extremely similar to Collateral in a lot of ways. The cast is insane. Ryan Gosling, Carey Mulligan, Oscar Isaac, Albert Brooks, Bryan Cranston, Ron Perlman, Christina Hendricks. And that's sort of a character study where a man who is like a stunt driver who moonlights as a criminal sort of gradually rediscovers his humanity and undergoes a symbolic death and is redeemed and reborn.
But with cars? and Heist?
It's a twist on the American monomyth where he lives and he appears to sort of ride off into the sunset with the cute girl next door at the end. And Carey Mulligan is great in it. Oscar Isaac is great. It's one of those movies that stylistically and in terms of the soundtrack, it's been really, really influential over the last decade. Amini also wrote Snow White and the Huntsman, which I can't remember if I saw, but it's sort of a retelling of Snow White. And then Joby Harold wrote Awake, of all things, which starred Hayden Christensen. 2 years, 2 years after Revenge of the Sith came out. I remember watching this and being absolutely horrified by it. It's a medical thriller in which Christensen is undergoing heart surgery. Like he has some life-threatening heart condition. He's like a filthy rich heir of some kind. Like he's got this sort of empire that he's set to inherit. And when he's undergoing surgery, it turns out like that the people doing the surgery are all conspiring to kill him and make it look like an accident and steal his fortune for themselves. And one of many, many twists in the movie is that he's one of those rare people in medical history who remains conscious and aware despite the anesthesia. It's really horrifying and really riveting. And it was one of the first times I saw Hayden in a movie other than Star Wars. And it has Jessica Alba in a role that people would find pretty surprising, I think. He also wrote the Guy Ritchie King Arthur movie, as well as Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, which was a pretty damn good zombie movie in the last couple years. Our friend Josh got really obsessed with that for a while and was tweeting about it a lot. Is it Josh Johnson? Yeah.
Oh, well, Josh Johnson being
yeah.
as brilliant as he is.
Yeah. It's got sort of a depressing ending, but it's just a really good movie with there's like a zombie king and queen and they're in love and all the characters are just really memorable and it's very well made. Hannah Friedman worked as part of the Pixar Brain Trust at one point and with Disney Animation. So she sort of worked behind the scenes as a writer. A lot of her official IMDb credits are for like 1 or 2 episodes of various TV shows, like the 2014 About a Boy adaptation. I think that's a Nicholas Hornby novel, like the like High Fidelity, really popular like British novelist, I think. And then she worked as an on-set writer for Wet Hot American Summer, First Day of Camp for Netflix. And she's working on the upcoming Willow, which of course has all sorts of Lucasfilm and Star Wars DNA.
Oh, nice. So, I'm looking forward to that. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, she's sort of, and she's not the only Pixar alum on Obi-Wan. Also, Andrew Stanton, who worked on Obi-Wan parts 5 and 6, has screenplay by credits on Toy Story, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, WALL-E, John Carter, which is like very Star Wars, Finding Dory, Toy Story 4, and he's actually directed some of those, Finding Nemo, WALL-E, John Carter, and he's directed TV episodes for Better Call Saul, Stranger Things, and a relatively recent sci-fi show called For All Mankind. So he's all over the place, but yeah, this weird dichotomy here of like Pixar alums and then like these gritty crime dramas that I love. Yeah. And it fits kind of the, Deborah Chow has that Better Call Saul background. The editor, Kelly Dixon on Obi-Wan, she's from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. So it's kind of like that Rian Johnson thing of like, let's get those prestige TV people and put them on Star Wars. And I would love to know how that got started. Probably because Kathy Kennedy probably just likes those shows, I would guess.
Yeah, maybe. Right. And she tends to like haul people into her office that she's interested in and just was like, let's have a conversation, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I just want to say, like, I really appreciate the fact that they've had so many voices contribute to what this ended up being crafted into. I'm sure they had a writer's room. I'm sure that it went through several iterations, but like sometimes that's what it takes. And also, it's just so thoughtful. Riva's story is so thoughtful. And that, for me, is what I'm most thankful about. I don't think that it's hard to get Anakin and Vader and get him correct. I have been fooled before by Marvel Comics, but this is pretty consistent with I'm a sad boy locked in my walking coffin that, you know, we get most of the time from him, right? I think Obi-Wan at this point in time, I think I saw one of the writers talking about how, you know, it was really important for them to show him being utterly depressed. And that it was like really important, like they fought for it. And that to me just shows like they understand sort of the darkness within themselves, and they're speaking from something deep within them from a truth's perspective. But it takes iteration, and I'm really, really thankful for how much they worked on it to get it right. And it wasn't just groupthink or one person making decisions, you know, which is like both are bad, right? Groupthink and just one person making decisions doesn't seem to work for Star Wars. I know Rian Johnson had the sanity check of Carrie Hart, right? Every page he wrote was reviewed by her and talked about with her. So as much as like Rian has like the full writing and directing vision of The Last Jedi, he collaborated for sanity checks with his producer, his main executive producer, Carrie Hart, right? So that's, I don't know. I just thought it would be really interesting to talk about how this came together, and that like it's not necessarily the backgrounds that you think will work. We'll get into the meat and the heart of why this worked so well, especially for me personally. Yeah. All right. You ready to dig into this show?
Yeah, works for me.
Awesome. So we start out with Tatooine and sort of one of the settlements, and Riva is just like looking around and confronts somebody. And right away, I was struck by how different her look was.
Oh, yeah.
What did you think of this?
Well, instantly, I was like, she's like wearing a Jedi robe. And whether she knows it or not, I think that's an intentional thing that they were communicating to us, saying, you know, she's changing. And, you know, it's sort of foreshadowing through the costume. Yeah.
And her hair was taken down and was loose and just like tied back very like lightly.
Yeah.
Which I thought was just brilliant. And then she wore the hood. And to me, she looked the most that they could turn her inquisitorial outfit, the leather, to Anakin from Revenge of the Sith. Like the black under leather and the brown cloak.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And she says, I'm looking for a farmer. And this like just tickled my brain so much. Like the farmer named Owen. But because we've already had this symbolism of, are you a miner? No, we're farmers from Tall. Okay, let's talk about symbolism of planting and farmers versus miners.
Yeah. Miners are...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Basically, miners are people who they get their value from the past, right? Like that's, you know, and farmers are like looking for the rain for the harvest. You know, it's like the total opposite. You know, they're the ones planting the, you know, the future. Yeah, and this really ties into, you know, Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, the idea that farming, if you let it happen and you let the time pass, and it will all come to fruition. There's nothing that you can do to, you know, rush it. But also it's the idea of
you're growing something, you're creating something, you're making something versus taking something. And it's a big metaphor across the board for the light side of the Force versus the dark side of the Force, where the dark side of the Force is just take, greed, control, stripping away of resources. Again, back to my mining episode. That's what the dark side is. But farming is I'm creating, I'm nurturing, I'm growing, I'm collecting. And it's absolutely a foreshadow for Kenobi, for the seeds that Anakin has planted in the galaxy that will eventually heal him. Oh, so good.
Yeah. You mentioned control and mining and industrialization and all that stuff is really an attempt to control nature, control civilization and all that stuff. And farming implies like letting go and accepting that you can't control things. I watched 3:10 to Yuma over Father's Day weekend, and a big part of the plot is that they're having a drought and like all their crops are dying. And they're like basically like praying for rain, and you can't really do much about that, like come what may. I think it's a therapy thing too, where like if you go to a therapist and you say like oh, I'm worried that my home is going to burn down and my dog is going to get trapped, like all these like horrible things that like people imagine and tell their therapist, right? They say like, well, what would you do the next day and the day after that? You can't control that. They try to teach you to let go and just not worry about the things that, you have no control over. And I feel like that very much ties into what Obi-Wan is sort of going through here, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what is that? I don't know, famous adage. I don't even know where it's from, but like the idea that you can know the things that you can change, know the things that you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Or like let go of the things you can't change. Because really, like if you can't change it, you're just wasting energy on worrying about it. You're just that's just like beating yourself up.
Yeah. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I feel like that ties into sort of how Kenobi treats Anakin in this episode as well. There's a lot of sort of water cooler talk about, what I would have done, if it were me, and that kind of thing. And Obi-Wan kind of says his piece and walks away and leaves, and it's very, very similar to that whole water thing.
And like this ties to big meta plot area, but also just in life, you can't save other people from their own darkness. Right? You can only be there to offer help and support and like be there emotionally and like a leg up or whatever, be an ally to them. But they're the ones that have to take the journey. They're the ones that have to take the steps. And that's hard. I know that's hard. The worst thing that you can experience is watching somebody else in their darkest and hardest place. But it has to be them that takes the steps. Right? You can help them with a leg up. You can help them and remind them that they're loved, but they're the ones that have to walk the path.
Yep.
So we cut back to the chase of the ship that's leaving the planet and the Star Destroyer that's chasing after them. Didn't this feel like A New Hope?
Yeah.
Like the beginning of A New Hope with the ship, like with the Tantive 4 that's being chased?
It did, and I think it used music from like the Battle of Hoth too at the same time.
Yeah,
which is funny. Or
and it also felt
Empire
a lot like
in general.
TLJ, like the slow chase, but less slow.
Yeah, right, definitely.
Yeah, and we're seeing like already this idea of Obi-Wan talking about things like I have to do something. I can't just let this go. I can't, he knows he needs to resolve something still, because Roken also calls him out and says, this is about you two,
Yeah. You're doing this for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. This is personal, right? This is you two. But I really loved the moment when Leia is showing Lola to like the scared kid.
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, they're scared. She keeps their mind off of it. And Obi-Wan says, maybe I should borrow her too. What did you think of that?
Oh yeah, like he's like fully admitting to her that he's like terrified, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
There's sort of a bravery in that to be like, I'm like this legendary Jedi, but I'm equally terrified, even if it's maybe for different reasons.
Yeah, and it reminded me of the Carrie Fisher line, like, stay afraid, but do it anyways. It really, it resonated with me that way, but it really was striking to me how much that is a difference in Obi-Wan being able to, although not like directly say, I'm scared, he is admitting he is afraid, which literally Yoda says in the prequels, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And this is the dark side.
Yeah, there's a lot of echoes of lines throughout this whole series. And Luke says in Empire to Yoda, I'm not afraid. And I feel like there's some character in this series that says that.
It's Luke.
Luke as the...
Luke says it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I thought it was cute too, because he hasn't learned this lesson, right? Which is you can't separate yourself from the feelings. And this is the first point by which we get kind of a rewrite of the Jedi, what we assume is the canon or the doctrine, the dogma of the Jedi. We get a rewrite of it in this episode where, Obi-Wan and Yoda at this point in time are the Jedi.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And he's like, no, actually, I'm afraid, but I'm not going to let myself be controlled by these things. And like water, the feelings exist, but you just let them flow, right? The way of water again. Right?
Yeah.
Because you can't deny these things, denying feelings and saying, I shouldn't be this. I shouldn't feel these things, lead you down. It's the denial that leads you down these paths. Right? It's ignoring it. It's hiding it away. Right? And so this just was like, I was like, yeah, this is why this show is so extremely valuable to Star Wars, because I've literally, what was it, like weeks ago, I was arguing with somebody on Twitter and they were like, they told me that like Yoda's doctrine was like written in gold, like no attachments. And I'm like, thank you, Obi-Wan Kenobi, for re-showing the lens of why the prequels were to show that the Jedi were wrong. Right?
Yeah. I think if you look at it in terms of like, I don't know, it's making me think of like Buddhism class in college. But so if you have like Yoda and then you have like, I don't know, like Darth Maul and Palpatine on the other end of the spectrum, you sort of got like Buddhahood, which like enlightenment, this idea of like the annihilation of the self, and like you're just, you're just stardust, that's it. And then on the other side with like Darth Maul and Palpatine, etc., Vader, you have this idea.
All the self.
You have rugged American individualism, like Ayn Rand, like if it feels good, then it's good. And that's all there is to it. And it, like, nobody matters but you, like, basically. And obviously there's more nuance to it than that. But there's a certain sections of like Buddhism and many other religions that would say, somewhere there is a middle path, a third way, or, and that's what we've been talking about in the show, like nonstop. And this episode kind of really drove that home with this acknowledgement of these things. Like, you can be scared, you can care for people.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean you're going to go down the dark side or you're going to be corrupted by it. You're just acknowledging that these things exist. And in fact, acknowledging these things exist helps make you stronger. It's so funny that you said that. Like, I've been thinking about that a lot with just even like our political systems and how culturally there's like this rugged individualism that exists out there. And, you know, like we see it a lot in capitalism and and billionaires, like how much can I own versus, you know, how much people can I help? Like, you know, how can I help others, or how can I create something for others that will bring them joy or bring them peace? And it's all there in Star Wars. And it's really, really important that we listen and we absorb that, right? And we take that home with us. And it's something that if we enjoy it, we'll rewatch it. And maybe for the people that it didn't quite resonate with the first time, they might get struck by it in a moment. And it's easier to digest that than necessarily sometimes things from a religious perspective, because like part of this show, this show itself is showing to be more anti-institutional, right? Anti-dogma, anti-Jedi as an organization, and more as a non-denominational faith, right? A journey that you need to take for yourself. And that's really, really interesting and revolutionary. And that's why I'm like, this is super valuable.
Yeah. I'm reminded of in The Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan says, like, if you listen to them, you would be on the council. Like, basically, like, Master Qui-Gon, why don't you play by the rules and do everything by the book? And Qui-Gon would say, like, to hell with all that and being on the council. Like, I don't want any of that. And I think Obi-Wan, by this point in the show, is really kind of reached that point where... you know, he's working in a meat factory out in the desert. You know, he's been humbled. And I think our civilization here in the West, you know, Western capitalism with the state of things, we could all use a dose of humility. We could use more than a dose of compassion and just this idea. You know, I think of like Rey polishing her, the scraps that she scavenged, and she like looks over at that like old woman, and then the bosses sort of come along and they're like, hey, you know, get back to work. Like, don't look at that woman. You know, don't acknowledge your humanity and your common ground with like the people around you. You know, keep your head down and work. You know, and boy, Star Wars is good sometimes like that. Well,
and Star Wars that's refreshing like this in a completely predictable way, for me at least, from a mythic perspective, feels and resonates in such a satisfying way that people are like, well, this was so amazing. And it was, because it resonates with the mythic structure and with the symbolism that all says the same things to us psychologically. That's why it works, which is brilliant. So like going back to my like predictions episode, I did hope that there was like a Force meetup, but I think we kind of got that later on this episode. So I'll talk about that when we get there. The next thing that happens is we get lines from Luke.
Oh, sure.
Luke goes into the like, it looks like a shop or something. They're picking up a belt, and the shop owner's like, howdy. And I was like, yeah, it is the West. It is.
It looks like Watto's shop where Anakin worked.
Oh, does it? Very
kinda,
similar?
A little loosely, yeah.
Yeah, it's got that vibe. And you know, we definitely get the sense of like Owen being the gruff parent, but loves him. Like, he's not giving him too much jab that he broke the belt or whatever for the speeder, but Yeah, a little bit, you know.
I think we see him sort of smile I think he sort of cracks a thing about like how tough a parent he is, but he sort of like smiles really affectionately, and it's kind of like the warmest version of Owen that we've seen so far.
Yeah,
it's nice.
we see some amazing Owen and Beru parenting in this episode, and like it kind of puts to breast all of the Owen and Beru were abusive parents random Twitter conversation that was out there for a while.
Yeah. Every parent in Star Wars is like, just the worst parent ever, according to Twitter. So, but it's fine.
Yeah, but we find out, Owen hears like, oh, somebody's coming after Luke. Mm-hmm. And so, he immediately rushes off, of course. And then we cut back to basically Leia being mad at Obi-Wan for wanting to leave.
Yeah.
And him just like reiterating that, you're the future, he says to her. Mm-hmm. You're all the future, right? Which is like this idea that we've been talking about, like these seeds have to have time to grow. Mm-hmm. You're still hoping, you're saving something. It's just reiterating like the Rose line of saving what you love, right? Like Obi-Wan is starting to understand how important life is, right? And hope and the ability to help others. This is like going from where he was at in the start of the show, where he wasn't even willing to save his coworker from a dishonest like boss, right? Or save somebody in danger he wasn't willing to put himself at risk, right? To, I'm going to completely sacrifice myself, guys.
Yeah.
Right? And although we know exactly where he's going to go, like if you were watching this and you had never seen a Star Wars before, right? We would assume he would die at the end of this. And that's where it feels a lot like The Last Jedi in Rose and what she was willing to do. It's not quite the Luke action, right? Mm-hmm. Rose she wasn't willing, like she was able to survive too, which is really important. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other thoughts about
well,
that?
I like that the path is sort of this nifty, fresh way of saying, like, it's symbolic of both the rebellion and the Jedi. Like, it's the seeds of both, like, Leia's legacy and Luke's legacy in this sort of ragtag group of people who have kind of, like, been in hiding, so it's sort of yet another way to feed into the stuff that comes to fruition in like Rebels and Rogue One, and of course Andor. We'll delve into that a bunch, but and sort of in the deleted scenes and George Lucas's mind all really began with Padme and Bail Organa in like Revenge of the Sith. They had that sort of proto-rebellion meeting in the deleted scenes that all kind of led here. So there's always like good people willing to stand up for what's right. We hope, and
saving lives and helping people, because it primarily there's a Jedi element to this. There's a Force user element to what they're moving, right? They're moving the hope of the Force, the people that are sort of like the instruments of the universe.
Yeah,
right?
And it's sort of like a religious persecution that's happening. We kind of talked about with Bobo. We talked about a lot of that, that sort of side of it. Operating in that mode of like the Moses and all that. And we've kind of got that here with Kenobi being sort of the symbol of the, this religion that has basically been wiped out by people like Reva and the Grand Inquisitor and Vader. But
are you saying that Obi-Wan Kenobi looks like Space Jesus?
Well,
like the meme?
there's
the fact that people like use him in portraits of Jesus and fool their mothers.
there's a big like sort of Jesus-like moment at the end of the episode, I thought personally, but we can get to that later. But I thought that was very Jesus-like. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I loved that Leia, we now have this arc of Leia protesting and yelling at Kenobi, like, don't go, you promised, like, don't leave me.
Yeah.
Versus when Holdo tells Leia in The Last Jedi, like, I'm going to be the one to stay on the ship. I'm going to sacrifice my life to, stop Snoke's ship. And, like, she just sort of is very somber and accepts it without question. She doesn't really fight Holdo. She knows, like, okay, this is someone who has made a decision to do something like really, heroic and so I'll just kind of accept it and like hug my friend goodbye and say, may the force be with you. And I'll go on my merry way. Whereas here she's, she doesn't understand that whole thing that Obi-Wan's trying to do. So you have kind of a nice through line there from sort of Leia's youth to her, some of her last, finest moments in Carrie's performance, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get briefly the sort of Owen and Beru prep, and we get this like, I don't know, crazy, wonderful Beru.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, and Owen, all he needs is you and I. Like, yeah.
Yes.
Like, my husband was like, wouldn't it be amazing if Owen and Beru actually survived and are roaming the galaxy on the Lamb? Like, and it was like they actually, like, in A New Hope, they actually survived.
That would be amazing.
Like, and then, like, they do a show with them.
That would be, that could be such a rich moment for, like, after Return of the Jedi. Like, he, like, runs into Owen and, wait, what?
He just gives him a hug. Like, I'm so glad you're okay.
Yeah. I kind of want that now. Like those skeletons that we saw in A New Hope were just like stormtroopers, and it was just a big
misunderstanding. Like they just like faked it or whatever, or blew them up, and then stole their armor and ran away. I don't know. I love the idea of Owen and Beru being like not easily taken down. And I know that the sacrifice for Luke is like really important, like the death of his guardians and like his parents who he grew up with, and that like he's sad about it. And now this recontextualizes A New Hope so much more to make me sad about it. I know that that's like, it's one of the weird things, like when Star Wars fixes itself, it hurts more when you rewatch those moments. Like when they make you care about Alderaan now, like we care about Alderaan, we care about Beru.
Oh, yeah.
So it makes A New Hope harder in some ways, but more impactful with what they go through. Same with like Obi-Wan and the connection with Leia and Luke, and what those like the little smile he gives them as he sees them running away and then gives himself up to the Force. Like, what the hell, Star Wars? You made me love the little smile Alec Guinness gives us.
Yeah. It's very smartly done.
Yeah, like it makes all Star Wars elevated. This is wonderful. Next we have like Leia and Obi-Wan, and we had the like, kind of pre-conversation with Obi-Wan asking Haja to take her home, which I went into this in a huge Patreon rant kind of about wholeness and Kenobi and how well it's executed, but that Haja is this piece of him that is redeemed in that, like, there's no money in this for Haja, right? But he's still willing to do a good thing, even though he's a liar, even though Obi-Wan has been lying to himself all these years, like sort of what Haja represents to him. He still trusts the goodness within Haja to protect her. So good. And he's like, I talked to her. You're welcome. And he has the conversation and he gives her Tala's holster.
Yeah.
Tell your father I tried. And then she asks him to come back, which, oh, yeah. she wants the Bens in her life to come back, and that hurts from a Ben Solo perspective.
Yeah, there's some Ben Solo in this episode for sure, in more than one spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like people aren't afraid to talk about him anymore in a woobified way.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
You know, it's like culturally, especially with Star Wars Twitter, talking about it in that way. It helps make him a victim and make him a baby. Again,
yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, yep. You get a little that with like Hayden's Anakin too. But yeah, there was for a long time. I think that people at Lucasfilm were listening to those voices of like, oh, you got to take this stuff deadly serious. You know, if you wear like an Imperial symbol on your jacket, like you might as well. People kind of took the wrong messages from these stories sometimes, and I feel like people are figuring that out and relaxing and realizing that it is supposed to be hopeful. It isn't a story about like punishment and
yeah, and like punishment isn't restorative justice,
right?
Punishment
right, yeah.
isn't justice,
right?
Yeah. And then we have this moment where, again, Obi-Wan is talking to Qui-Gon, and like this is somebody was talking about, and I apologize, I do not remember who it was, but shout out to this person because they're amazing. But they were talking about how this was very much like the Garden at Gethsemane moment, like where Jesus is doubting himself before he has to go and like get crucified. And like it's before the betrayal that happens with Judas. He's in the garden and he's talking with God and is like, do I really have to do this? I guess I have to do this. It's really really important that Obi-Wan has these doubts, right? I have to face him whether he dies or I do. This ends today.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't end today, eh?
Yeah.
And this was a false binary that he set up for himself, right?
He says one of us will die. And of course, we know that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, it's, in a way, he does die, though, right, Alex? Like, symbolically.
Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Obi-Wan dies.
Right.
The Obi-Wan of the past dies, right? The one that couldn't let this go. The one that couldn't forgive himself for what he had done to his friend and forgive himself for what had happened to his friend. And I really loved how Obi-Wan kind of gave Roken there aren't that many leaders left, like keep at it. Like that was so important for me. I need Roken back. He's great.
He is great. Yeah, really great. One of those sort of roles that not a ton of screen time, but just like really steals the scene for sure. Great presence. Kind of like Bale, kind of like one of those characters that you sort of sit up straight when he's on screen. But really great job by O'Shea Jackson Jr., I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah, he's on Twitter and he seems very happy to like have been given this opportunity and like, bring him back. He's great. I hope he shows up in Andor. Like, I just feel like he'd be super valuable. I actually just don't want him in a military position. I want him still like rescuing people, but in a non-military way. I just feel like that's so important from a fact that we don't get a lot of those stories.
Sort of the grassroots, like mutual aid type, almost like Enfys Nest with like a little less violence, maybe. I don't know. Although I like her too.
Yeah, no, she's great too. Just like the idea that fighting is not the only thing that matters, right? Violence is not the only thing that matters. It's also what you save. It's also what you protect. It's also what you help. And it just is such a refreshing thing that was represented in the show that is valuable.
Yep.
We get the last bit of prep of Owen Beru and Luke with, giving him directions. And this is where the line where Luke says, I'm not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, you will be.
Yeah.
In my Yoda voice. One of the only times that he doesn't speak in Yoda speak.
Yeah.
He just straight up says, you will be. You will be. But really, it's like this is showing Luke is before the point that Obi-Wan is at in his own journey, not understanding his own emotions, and that the fear is not something that he needs to keep separate from himself. He needs to understand it, but not be afraid of his own fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the fights, what I'd really like to do is kind of talk about them one by one, rather than kind of how they're broken up in the actual episode. I just think that for editing, they edited it back and forth to kind of maintain the pace and the action and to keep us on our edge, especially with what was happening to Luke, what was happening to Reva, what was happening to Anakin and Obi-Wan. But I think it's valuable to talk about Obi-Wan and Vader first, and then Reva and Luke and what happens there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the intercutting, it's sort of a lot like episode 1 and episode 3 were done with like the sort of parallel battles playing out, but it also just really ratchets up the tension of Reva hunting a little boy and Obi-Wan is off on some other planet, so you're like, oh geez, like is Luke Skywalker gonna get out of this one, so it really disproves that whole like, well, we know what happens to all these people.
I mean, good direction, good writing.
Yeah.
You can do whatever the heck you want.
yes. And
Obi-Wan's like, I gotta go. He jumps in his little ship, goes down, and Vader's like, arch! He's going that way. We're going after him. And I love that the Grand Inquisitor's like, he's just a Jedi.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan's like, he's not any Jedi. Ugh.
Yeah.
And like the Grand Inquisitor's like, I'm done. Like, you go after him. I'm gonna go have a bath. Like,
yeah.
And of course, like Vader doesn't expect anyone to join him, which might have been smarter. But this is personal. We've already established this. This is the confrontation we have been waiting for. But is it the confrontation that maybe people expect? It's deeply emotional.
Yeah.
What did you think of the planet?
I mean, I loved it. It was evocative of EU, like Legends planets for me. Like there was, is it like Vijun or something where Darth Vader had his castle in the EU, and I don't know, it felt kind of like that. I think I'd seen that in like video games at some point, and or comics or something. And then there was like Rusan in like the Darth Bane books, like just sort of like a rocky, barren world where like the Jedi and the Sith had like all these battles. It feels like that. It feels very primordial. You have on one side, you have these like jagged sort of Tatooine, like sort of phallic, like rock formations, like these towering, very kind of like dangerous and Vader-like, Mustafar-like. And then on the other side, you have just like a perfectly flat, almost like underworld plane, and you got like these beautiful moons in the background. It's like very dreamlike, and it's definitely in that realm of this is some metaphorical landscape that is to find out what this planet's called is something you have to buy some book for. It's not like it's not like this place that has like civilization on it. It is primordial, heaven and hell kind of stuff, which is nice.
It really felt like a liminal space for me, like a transitional space, like where there was kind of like it looked cloudy and seemed like there was lightning, but it also reminded me of Exegol in that like it was a place that felt between places.
Yeah.
Right? Like it didn't feel like it was in the reality that they were in, which for me, like I'm flexing this to say that this felt very World Between Worlds for me.
Absolutely.
The same way that Exegol is supposed to be like a place beyond or a place outside of space and time and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the rocky pillars themselves, pillars like this are created because of erosion, right? So either water or wind, right? That's the only way those sorts of pillars are created.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, pillars are cornerstones or things that represent truth, right? God, truth, the way, like famous pillars that have been created represent Buddhist fundamental things like Ashokan. So like where Ahsoka, the name comes from because they switched the letters, Ashokan pillars, which walk through the Buddhist cycle of life is suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cause of suffering is desire. The cause of desire must be overcome. And when desire is overcome, there is no more suffering. And thus you are reborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's all about, like, pillars mean that we're confronting truth symbolically.
Mm-hmm.
What I found absolutely lovely about his arrival was that he finds Lola in his pocket, and it's like when he's gone off on a journey, and sometimes like my kid, I'll have to go on like a work trip and my kid will put one of their stuffies in my suitcase. It's kind of like that. And he puts it on the dash of the ship, just like you would in a car. It was just so adorable. And it's just like, she's in his mind.
Yeah. Yep.
And they meet each other, and Obi-Wan is like at the start of the pillars, and Vader is standing at the plane.
Yeah.
Like the open space.
Yep.
Which is so cool. And he says, "Have you come to destroy me, Obi-Wan?" It's very like sarcastic.
Yeah.
And I loved how James Earl Jones pronounced Obi-Wan.
Oh, is it sort of like an accented like Obi-Wan or like that kind of thing? Yeah,
Obi-Wan. Like it was like, I don't know. Like I didn't know we would get an amazing voice acting performance out of James Earl Jones in the year 2002. This is wild.
Yeah. And like they're using that AI technology too for at least parts of it. So I am curious to see the behind the scenes of that. Like if like Hayden performs it and then like it's somehow based on Hayden's performance, or if like that's totally incorrect. I'm not sure, but I think they used that respeecher text. So it'll be interesting to see.
If they did, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing, but yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that in the behind the scenes, when that Disney Gallery thing eventually comes out at some point, like it'll be surprising how that was all fit together, I imagine, but we'll see. It
felt so unique in how it was said. That's all I'm saying. Like it was just really like mocking.
Yeah.
Like I was like not expecting that from James Earl Jones's voice. It's nuanced.
Yeah, they're very sassy in this. Like it is very much that Kylo of like, did you come here to save my soul? You know, that forgive me, save my soul. It
mirrored that.
Yeah, even the shot like from the side, like the sort of like samurai face off kind of thing.
Yeah,
very much the shot from The Last Jedi.
And Obi-Wan says, "I will do what I must," and then Anakin says, "Then you will die." Ooh, this is really important.
Yeah.
Shadows can't be destroyed.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Anakin can't kill Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan can't kill Anakin. So what are they fighting for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This whole show, it's like operating on the level of like emotions and like
space opera,
the inner growth,
it's all spiritual conflict, right?
Spiritual, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is how, like, I loved how it blends in very well to the future fight that they have in A New Hope, right? And it's, people always complain about that one. Like, at least jerks on the internet complain about that one. Like, but the emotional stakes feel so raw. And this doesn't seem that much more complicated than that one.
Yeah, it's more like the camera and the composition, like, makes it feel a little more epic. But it's, the choreography of the fight is very similar.
Yeah. And you can see, like, 9 years later, like, they've slowed down a little bit and they don't want to be doing as much. Like they made it fit in the universe, right? And and so the spiritual conflict that's happening and the fight is between Vader and his, like, wanting to win, obviously, and Obi-Wan being against himself, and the conflict of not wanting to kill his friend, but knowing or feeling like that was the only solution. And so the fight is actually accentuated by Anakin Vader's dialogue. Your strength has returned, but the weakness still remains.
Yeah.
Ooh, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it's actually accentuated later on in the episode directly back to Vader's face.
Oh, yeah.
Weakness is love.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
This powerful connection to compassion for others, mercy for others, loving others unconditionally. The feeling like Obi-Wan can only do violence against Anakin is the strength that Vader is returning, like, using, right? And Vader's warped view of reality that in so many ways the Emperor has built in him is that strength is hate and, like, willingness to dominate others, and love is weakness. This is straight up speaking to the dominator culture that men, especially, are not allowed to love.
Yeah.
They can only be violent.
Yeah. It's also, this episode, like each episode, you know, you have a 6-part series. There are 6 parts of the sort of George Lucas's original, you know, Skywalker saga, like, you know, up until he did Revenge of the Sith. And so it's really like planting seeds for Return of the Jedi and echoing Return of the Jedi, but also episode 3. And so it's playing with stuff like that, where, like, how do you get from, like, the Anakin of, you know, his fall to sort of the conflicted, ultimately redeemed, you know, old man in Return of the Jedi who, you know, saves his son from the Emperor and stuff. And so you see that, like, implication in the Emperor too, when he's sort of taunting Luke with the idea that, like, Leia and Han and Chewie and all those guys, like, they're not strength, they are tools with which to, you know, toy with Luke and control him and ultimately, like, you know, claim him as, like, you know, become his master, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we see again a reflection of the flashback episode, like the flashback that they had in the previous episode, where this is why you lose, right? Like, it's back to winning and losing for Anakin, like this binary that he has created for himself, these binaries of, if I'm not winning, I'm losing.
Yeah.
Right? But what does winning look like to Obi-Wan? Well, it's probably not killing his friend.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it would be,
right?
You know.
And the fight itself is just, like, really glorious with the flashes of, like, the different saber lights and how they accentuated the different light ups and how the conflict feels spiritual because of the flashes back and forth between blue and red.
Yeah.
And, like, it feels so good because we've seen this before. This feels very good. We saw it in TFA especially. And it just, like, it feels good to see on screen the lighting effects on people.
Yeah, where it's a little bit more, like, natural and intense, like, it's sort of exaggerated.
Yep. We get the, you know, dramatic, like, I'm going to be a badass Vader move where he, like, drops Obi-Wan low and he has the high ground, Like he'd been dreaming about it for a really long time. And we get to the like burying moment, like where he buries Obi-Wan.
Yeah. Ben back in the pit, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I wrote Ben in the pit. Oof. Like again, like there's so many parallels to Tross.
Yeah.
I was shocked, like the Ben in the pit, how the planet kind of felt like Exegol, this like non-existent space, just the like giving up of hope, etc. And you know, we get the shot of Vader's like helmet with like the red, sort of like he's covered in blood almost. It was really fascinating. Did you think that you could defeat me, is what he says. You have failed, master. Oh, so good. Because like in so many ways, this is talking about the shadow aspects of ourselves, from Obi-Wan Kenobi's like internal confrontation with his unconscious, right? This monster is sitting out there in himself that he has created, and you can't defeat the monsters in you. They just grow more powerful if you fight them. What you have to do is understand them and then put them in their right place, right? In Robert Bly perspective, he would say you consume your shadow, you eat your shadow, and then it's yours, right? It's not out there. And so he's buried, right? So this is what I like to think about as like a crucible moment, right? Where he's literally like crushed. But instead of like lava, what happens with sort of Anakin being kind of sealed in the armor, right? It's sealed with rock, which is, again, lava that has been cooled by water. What does Obi-Wan remember? Well, it's like all of his perceived failures. Yeah. All the past, right? And Joseph Campbell talks about how if you could see with the eyes of God, you would neither see the past nor the future. You would just see what is. Everything is the same, right? Everything is one. And this is the key moment, because he sees the past and then he sees the future. He remembers Leia and Luke, and he goes away from the false binary of him versus Anakin and creates a third way with them, right? They are the thing that leads him back on path and in his middle way from a Buddhist perspective, right? And it's love and joy and guiding, and it's the Force, right? It's all of those things together, because you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about your interconnections with things that are bigger than you. And it's personified by the line that he uses with Leia, which is, you know, what does it feel like when you turn on the lights? Right? From the darkness. He's in the darkness and he has this guiding light. It's the joy in his life that he's looking for. And this is wholeness from a hero's journey perspective. And specifically this moment when he is reborn and escapes this atonement with himself, right? With what he has created, with everything. He's done this atonement moment where he's put to rest this old version of himself and all of these things that have happened, and starts to pivot towards the future, is what the hero's journey and the way of water is all about. Because the way of water is you will have all of these disparate, separate pieces of yourself, but water always finds itself again and comes back together. And metaphorically, whoever is separated, like all of these pieces, when you are finally down at your lowest point and fully dead, right? Yeah. Underground, dead, you will be able to be reborn again. And it's just so good. It's just so good. Bell Hooks talks about how we kind of have to accept, we have to be whole. We have to accept all of our feelings, and that we need to mourn our old self and create space for our new one to be born, that's how we change and are wholly transformed. And that's what happens in this burying moment. It's really, really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I like the sense that, Vader is like talking about strength, and then he sort of like picks up one of the pillars of rock, and it's sort of like this contrast of like him trying to like turn the tide and like master the elements, and then Kenobi in the pit sort of becomes the elements, and sort of, it says like, so he emerges and has like the rocks are just all like sort of an extension of him, and it's very like effortless, whereas Vader's like, look how much I can lift, bro, that kind of like this very sort of effortful thing, as opposed to like little tiny Yoda lifting the X-Wing because the rock and the tree and the X-Wing are all one. I don't know. It was beautiful imagery. I couldn't help but like the whole planet's lit like Exegol, and I thought that immediately. But then of course when you get in the pit, it's like oh boy, like we're really like playing through like sort of all the greatest hits to see how they connect in terms of like,
it's like echoes through the Force in some way, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Ben, right?
Yeah. And hurting, like, Kenobi, Vader is like hurting himself, is how like it all sort of I love that.
It does. Yeah. And ultimately this series reinforces that what the prequels were saying, but some people missed, that the Jedi were wrong about attachments, right? It's the interconnectedness, being like water, where everyone is water, that we are one, that enables Obi-Wan to know his place in the universe and reconnect truly with himself and the Force. And it just reaffirms like one of the earliest times we hear about the Force. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us. It penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. We are of it, and it is of us. I am with the Force, and the Force is with me. Mm-hmm. It's all saying the same thing, and that's super satisfying to hear it, but in a way that is entirely visual. Mm-hmm. Because Obi-Wan realizes he's not separate from the rest of the galaxy. He can no longer be separate from the rest of the galaxy. He must be one with the galaxy. This reaches his apotheosis moment, which is that he becomes divine in a way, right? Mm-hmm. Superhuman powered in a way, Buddha-like, Bodhisattva-like, right? Yeah. So the idea is he is enlightened through this rebirth and his realization. Joseph Campbell says with the hero with 1,000 faces, this is the release of potential within us all, which anyone can attain through herohood. For as we read, all things are Buddha-like. And again, this is the other way of making the statement, all beings are without self. He is interconnected to everything because he is the Force and the Force is with him. Mm-hmm. And we see how he's able to sort of be in the moment, and the rocks flow with him. He flows with the Force. He is able to easily off balance and overpower Anakin because now he flows like the way of water. So good.
Yeah.
And it's all shown, not told.
Yeah. Which is a very George mode to work in,
Yeah, George and Dave too. I think they need to talk about it more personally because not everybody, like sometimes people are in the right mind space to get this stuff and it feels right. But also sometimes people don't have the words to speak to what they're feeling deep inside. And so they come to podcasts like me, or they go to YouTube, and YouTube is like, you should hate this because it's terrible. And it's not terrible. It resonated with you.
Yeah.
And you have to feel it, right? You have to feel what it's doing for you.
Yeah.
And why apotheosis is important is because we come to the moment where we understand what God understands is that there is no difference. There isn't binaries out there in the world. We can make our own path, and we have the choice to make things happen the way we want them to happen. And that's what we see with Obi-Wan, is that he literally has the choice to kill Anakin if he wanted to. He had the choice to overpower him, but he chooses to confront him. And he cuts open his mask, which is, again, this is the classic Jungian persona, mask coming off, right? Like the persona being the mask or the affectation that you have built to show out into the world, into the universe. From a Jungian psychology perspective, it's very literal in Star Wars whenever people are wearing masks. I have an episode for this, because when do I not have an episode for this? Masks in Star Wars are these things that are used to hide your true self, and that your true self means to come out. And of course, that ties into Jungian psychology and the persona that we built for ourselves. And when our persona is too overpowering, it influences our ego or our perception of self. So Vader's persona has totally taken over Anakin. And in the most Anakin voice we hear in the entire show, except for the flashback, we hear, "Anakin's gone. I am what remains." Oh,
yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, some very good stuff here. I saw a clip on Twitter of Ethan Hawke talking about the new horror movie that he's in that's coming out, and he wears like these creepy ass masks in that. And he said that somebody who wears a mask is somebody who is very ashamed of who and what they are in that moment. And so I think that applies to Vader pretty well. This idea that, with Obi-Wan is sort of the one person in the galaxy that sort of knows Anakin, at this point. And also there's this thing where, Vader doesn't really have any fear or anything to prove around like 99% of the galaxy. But when he's with Obi-Wan, it's like, oh, this is the guy that I am less than, basically. Anybody else, like, no fear, no hesitation. Like, he'll take on the biggest space squid you throw at him and not break a sweat. But Obi-Wan Kenobi is here.
Kaiju. He defeated a kaiju, too.
Yeah. He's just so terrified of who he might be in the presence of Obi-Wan Kenobi, because he is like his father figure, and our parents, our older brothers, have a way of bringing the things we don't want to have come out. Out. And Obi-Wan apologizes. I'm sorry. Oof, yeah.
I'm sorry, Anakin. Oh, this is like speaking to the power of apology. We get Anakin back for a moment. Like it's just really powerful that we got this blue light, like this blue light that moves, and it's so subtle, and it's like, oh, it's just the lightsaber light, no, but this is the symbolism, right? We get Anakin for a moment. We get blue represents the light side in Star Wars. It just does.
Yeah.
That blue, that lightsaber blue, and I am not your failure, Obi-Wan.
So good.
That's Anakin.
Oh,
not Vader.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like he's using the bits that remain, because he knows his friend is suffering with this guilt, to absolve him, to to give him, I don't know, to reassure him in some way, to give him absolution that it wasn't him. And Mike Geodhart or Geodhart, Mike, my friend on Twitter, I'm not pronouncing this correct, but Mike G, he said, it didn't strike me until the second time that Anakin essentially offers Obi-Wan absolution in that unmasked moment. Even in his rage, it feels like he wanted to unwittingly salve his brother.
Yeah, I read that as like a very intentional thing where like the performance like softens and he seems sort of like like Anakin again, and there's a contrast and a progression from like, what was it, episode 3 on the mining planet, where I am what you made me. And then the huge progression from there to in part 5, he's like physically shaking. He's like very rattled and emotionally broken. Yeah. And here it's, I am not your failure, Obi-Wan. Like you
didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I did.
Yes.
Like, you had nothing to do with this, Obi-Wan. It was me, right? Oh. And this is really important psychologically, because we need to view this from the lens of, this is all sort of a masterful fight that's going on inside of Obi-Wan Kenobi's unconscious, like the weird misty state of this planet speaks to it being this like psychological underworld trip that he's in.
Yeah.
Right? This is important because one of the hardest things we have to do to become whole is forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
And offer absolution, a way back from the mistakes and our failures of the past. It's very TLJ all over again.
Yeah, I failed you, Ben. Right? I'm sorry. Yeah.
I failed you, Ben. I'm sorry. But this is the only way that you can be spiritually reborn and move on your journey to give other people the elixir. Right? Yeah. Traditionally, this is where you would ride off into the sunset if you never had the opportunity to forgive yourself. This is really, really important. This is how Obi-Wan is able to give the elixir to Luke. The love of Anakin Skywalker still exists, right? The unwillingness for Obi-Wan to ever kill Anakin, and thus sets up the unwillingness for Luke to never kill Anakin, right? But then we get the flash to red. Oh, so well done. Symbolically, again, he's gone back and he's covered, right? Anakin is buried deep, and we saw this very similarly in Rebels with Ahsoka. They did, like, we get kind of both sides of his mask broken. Yeah. So he's nice and primed and ready to be dealing with Luke by the time Luke gets around. So Obi-Wan breaks him, Ahsoka breaks him, and then Luke breaks him.
Yep.
The same way I will destroy you. Oh, then my friend is truly dead.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Darth. They threw that in there just to make A New Hope better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to like shut up some people on the internet.
Yeah. And Return of the Jedi better with then my father is truly dead. It's like that same sort of poke at Anakin's humanity. Which reminding and echoing, right? Echoing around in the coffin. Right, to wake him up. Yeah, and like, it's very easy to look at this episode and see like, oh, look at how Obi-Wan has changed. Look at how Reva changes, etc. But like, this episode just screamed, this is where we're cracking Anakin's armor in these last 2 episodes, like 100%. This is definitely about him changing too, and sort of getting him primed for redemption. He's still stuck in his catabasis, his lowest point, obviously. Like, he's still sealed in this walking coffin. But yeah, it's the elixir that is being taken forward, that people aren't willing to kill you, Anakin. Yeah. You've suffered a lot. Yeah. And then Obi-Wan leaves, and this is the sort of the thing about apotheosis in the hero's journey, is that you're filled with miraculous energy.
You're filled with power, right? He is interconnected with the Force now.
Mhm.
And things he could never do before, he can now do, which is he senses Luke across the friggin' galaxy.
Oh, right. Yep.
Right? He's like got this miraculous power from being whole as an individual, and being whole on the inside means you're whole with the outside. That's really, really important from a Force and from a sort of journey perspective. Wholeness means, and the miraculous power he has is just straight up empathy for others, and the fact that others suffer and that we are all in this together, and that you want to give compassion and love to others because that's empathy.
Mhm.
Literally, the elixir is empathy.
Yeah. Sometimes a very unpopular idea in our society, and people get assassinated for suggesting that we should all love one another and show mercy to our enemies and forgive each other. Like, very unpopular political idea, but
it's radical.
Somebody should look into it. Yeah.
This is why Obi-Wan Kenobi as a show is valuable.
Yes, it is. Yep.
To Star Wars in such an incredible way. All right, let's flash back to Reva. Let's do it. I mean, we were talking about this because I did think it was really important to kind of talk about them together in all those ways. So Reva approaches the farmstead. We have the dark Palpatine eyes all around the farmstead.
Yeah. Yep.
Again.
Yep.
But she's confronted right away by Owen and Beru. And like she realizes with how much Owen is really willing to like protect Luke. She's like, you love him.
Yep.
Like your own.
He is my own, I think he says. Yeah.
Yeah, he is my
own.
So
good.
It's so good. And then he counters back. It's like, what do you want? And she says, justice.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about this moment. She was adopted like him, right? Brought to the temple and not protected.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Owen is willing to die to protect Luke.
Yeah.
Right? This is just like, and Luke, who Owen's got to know, right? Like, she thinks Owen knows who Luke is. Like, she must think that like Owen knows that Luke is related to Anakin and like know all of these things.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I definitely read this.
What she knows, right?
Like, so her understanding is like, I am going to kill Vader's offspring to get revenge.
Yes.
Like, she knows all that intuitively, I think, through the little recording.
Yeah. And so she thinks that Owen knows what she knows.
Yeah.
And that Owen is willing to protect the child of Satan in a way.
Sure. Yeah. Like this sort of Rosemary's Baby kind of situation. Like he's dangerous, which, kind of goes back to that idea of like Ty's video essay that I love so much, that the boy with the horns on his head. Yeah. Like this idea that this like little innocent boy represents like monstrous power if he's allowed to, which is a very sort of like Disney princess kind of idea too. But
yeah. But is she seeking justice? No, she's seeking revenge, of course.
Yeah.
Right, like that. But she's confused. Like, this has already off-put her because, like, you must know what he is, right? You must know.
Yeah.
And she sort of seems like from a dark feminine perspective, she's almost like the witch, right? Like going after the child, the prophesized child, right? This is very fairy tale, in a way. Like, I must kill the prophesized child. Very Willow, right? Like the child, that must escape.
Yeah, or just like the Queen and Snow White, sort of like putting on the disguise and just having like this hood and being this sort of formless wraith in the night, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. And there's a lot in that. I'm not going to go into that this episode, but I am planning on a follow-up episode on the Dark Feminine, which Missy and I are super looking forward to talking about Reva as well as other Dark Feminine within Star Wars. It will be amazing. But what ends up happening is Luke runs off and again into like a valley, right? So between pillars in a way, right? Like in the crevices, in the lowest point between high places. at her lowest point, she sees herself in the childlike form of Luke.
Yeah.
She is the child. He is a child. They are one.
Mm-hmm.
And is able to deny the generational trauma that would have her repeat cycles of violence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they really hammer it home with like the seeing him as her young self and then her as like Anakin doing the Order 66. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it needed to be that obvious, I think.
Yeah.
As obvious as Luke looking at his hand, his mechanical hand, and looking at Vader's mechanical hand and being like, wait a second, we are one.
Yep.
And she experiences an apotheosis as well, right? She has come to terms, like an atonement. She has crossed it. She understands. Maybe she's not quite at the apotheosis, but she is at this atonement phase where she is now reborn because she is choosing to not kill. She's choosing to not take revenge. And we get the most wonderful living redemption of a live action character. We've had other living redemption in print form for Force users, but I am so happy that this is the first living redemption. We actually get to see it, and she lives, and literally nobody has a problem with her just being like, and now you're redeemed.
I'm good now. Yep.
Yeah.
Which, of course, like Obi-Wan does a good job of kind of... like talking her through it, which is cool. I love that.
Yeah. Like now you're a newly formed baby. She's literally like curled up like in a ball practically. You're a new formed baby. You're brand new. You're being reborn now. You're new Reva. And it's like what, have I become him? Like this, like, did I get through this? And it's like, yeah, you did it. You chose not to be him.
Yeah.
You made a different choice. And who you are now is up to you, and you're free. Wow. This is all so powerful. Like, it's really important stuff. And the fact that she lives, this gives us a template. This gives us a psychological journey for people who are like, I'm at my lowest point, or I've been affected by the abuse in the terrible things that have happened to me, and I'm going about this what I think is right. Like, that's the thing, is like, she always thought she was doing something right, but it was hurting others and thus hurting herself, and thus hurting the legacy of the people that had died with, around her. But she brought mercy. She brought peace to herself, and she forgave. She made the big choice, which was just turning around. It takes one moment. It takes one moment for everyone to make a different choice. And it was so great and amazing.
Yeah, it was really beautifully done. He says you've given them peace and you have honored them, like, by sparing Luke. And great performances all around. And it's just, I think a lot of people kind of wouldn't have believed that they would go all the way on this. I was picturing some sort of, half measure kind of thing where, like, like you can picture some really bad version of this episode where like she changes her mind and like decides that she's going to protect Luke from Vader and Vader kills her. That would be the sort of like lazy, like obvious version of this if we kind of went by like, Fallen Order, the way like people expect these stories to go sometimes because,
I was so scared they were going to do a Trilla.
Yeah.
I was so scared.
Yeah. I was sort of like putting on the clown makeup and telling myself like they were going to do this, but you always kind of just aren't sure. It just depends on who's in that room and who's willing to say no or.
Yeah, and how much they understand that these stories are really, really important from a collective unconscious perspective. That somebody's going to watch this episode, see themselves in Reva, and believe that there's a way out where they are allowed to live.
Yeah.
Where they're allowed to make something better of themselves, and now their choice is up to them. And I absolutely like, because we no longer see her after her lightsaber drop, right? Which, my bad joke about this is like, wow, that Lars Homestead is like coated in lightsabers.
Yeah.
Just like lightsabers everywhere. But because we no longer see her, like there's this rumor out there that there might be a Reva show. And there's also a rumor there might be a Cal Kestis show. But somebody out there was like, oh, it should be the path, right? Like Jedi saving Jedi or Force users saving Force users. And I'm like, yeah, that's dope. I love that. It would just create like such an interesting, I don't know, to the left story of the Skywalker saga.
Yeah. Like they've sort of given themselves a runway or a blue, like a map to, you can get around the fact that like there's not supposed to be like a million Jedi out there, but you can say like the Empire is hunting Force sensitive children. Maybe they're all just Force sensitives that are out there. Yeah, and she's someone who, like, her tragedy occurred as a child, so maybe she's like saving Force sensitive kids or something. I mean, it's very a fruitful idea. I mean,
her and Roken traveling around the galaxy saving Force sensitive kids.
Oh God,
I love it.
That'd be a good ship right there. That'd be good. Anyway, no, I don't know. I mean, you have a really great actress and a really great character that like a lot of people just like instantly embraced. It's like, oh my God, like this woman is like such a badass. A woman of color with a red lightsaber and like that incredible poise and uniform, and then but on top of that, you also get
the parallels to Anakin, baby Ben, Ben Solo, Kylo. Like you get this like, hey, this can be a new Darksider who comes back to the light, and we get to actually see what her life is like.
Yeah.
I love that. I hope we get it. I don't want it in comic form. I'm sorry. I don't.
No,
I want it live action.
Yeah, I want a series probably, or I guess I feel like movies is like asking for the impossible right now, but yeah, like a Disney Plus series starring Moses, and show people that changing and going from like the dark to the light, or however you want to phrase this, that she's just as powerful post-redemption as she was as like this, badass inquisitor who, I love the way she is in episode 1 and 2. But like, it would be really cool to see sort of this redeemed Reva, get to have adventures and be just as badass in a slightly different way.
Have a life, have love, discover themselves. Like that's amazing. We need those stories. We need the post-darkness stories, because also it's about how you bring what you learned, mercy and compassion for others, to others, showing that you're passing on the message.
Yeah. Super
important. So we get one last kind of follow-up from Vader before we kind of get the 3 Obi-Wan interactions in the denouement, right? Like the end of the episode, the wrapping it up. What did this all mean? Like the old school cartoons moral of the story we get practically. And the Vader one is kind of part of it, so I'm super excited. But we get like the I'm gonna get him, boss moment, right? Yeah. And the Emperor, somehow Palpatine has returned. We get him back, but he's a troll, right? He's like, I sense this like conflict. Yeah. Like, what's going on with you? Your feelings have left you weakened, right? Okay, what did we talk about? What is weakness to Vader?
Yeah, like compassion, basically, love.
Compassion, love, like all these light side feelings of weakness. That's weakness to the dark side, right? And so, this reaffirms Vader's persona of being Darth Vader and lapdog of the Emperor. And he's like, no, I'll obey you, master. Right. There's another Bell Hooks quote I want to use because I love her so much. And she, because of her work and how she thinks about the Dominator culture, especially with Anakin and Vader, almost every single quote resonates with how he is from a violence versus feelings perspective. The patriarchy demands all males engage in acts of psychic mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves, right? That's what, the Emperor is telling Vader, right? Be violent, don't love, don't be whole, cut up the pieces of yourself, continue to segment yourself so it's harder and harder to collect the missing pieces of yourself, like we saw Obi-Wan do in this series. Amazing.
Yeah. The patriarchy doesn't want you to cry or talk through anything because that
deal with you have to be tough, and being tough means that you must commit violence against others. And love and violence cannot exist in the same space.
Yeah, I think that's why you get a lot of knee-jerk sort of allergic reactions to things like the Anakin Obi-Wan fight in this episode too, from certain voices. It's people that are very comfortable living in this very old-fashioned patriarchal version of themselves. And
Bell Hooks talks about the dominator culture, right? It's patriarchal, imperialistic, white supremacist, capitalistic. And all of these things enforce each other. And this was an incredibly anti-dominator culture show in that it's anti-patriarchy. It wants men to be healed. It wants them to be fully connected and whole individuals. It's anti-capitalistic in that it's anti-mining, it's anti-greed, it's protecting others just for the sake of protecting others. Haja, even in the end, is more anti-capitalistic, right? It's anti-imperialistic because it's anti the empire, right? And of course, anti-white supremacist, right? Like it's all of these things. It is exactly what Bell Hooks talks about in The Will to Change, and these are incredibly important values for our culture and for us to view our society through this fictional lens, and to give us a template for ourselves to have these conversations. And what are the things that you're mutilating emotionally about yourself? What have you not given the space to confront? What have you not gone on your journey with? All super important stuff.
I also always think about how Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni always talk about like the Hayao Miyazaki movies and Studio Ghibli, and I think when you look at the sequel trilogy and you look at those Miyazaki movies too, you really see the template for the sequel trilogy, but also like how you can even take it further, and that idea of like recognizing like the humanity in a traditional sort of Western story would just be like, oh, the enemy, look at that uniform they're wearing, but it's like, if you want to get past that and get to like compassion and redemption and just sort of, seeing the oneness of all life, I feel like a really good place for those kinds of stories is, things like, Princess Mononoke and all that stuff. And I feel like, the more Star Wars leans into that, the more they're going to communicate these things that, maybe a little more sort of Eastern ideas or feminist ideas that,
I just consider them wholeness.
Yeah.
Right. And interconnectedness with the world and the culture and the people that we live with and share this earth with.
Yeah.
It is wholeness. We are not separate. We shouldn't be separate from ourselves, right? We shouldn't lock away pieces of ourselves. We shouldn't cut off pieces of ourselves to fit a certain way of being. And we shouldn't consider ourselves to be separate from our neighbors, because we all live here together and we have to support each other. And all of those values are open yourself up to love and compassion and empathy and humanity. That's the light side of the force. It is. And the guide to that is joy, is love, is compassion. And when you're in those places, when you're in that mode, it's easy to find your path. It's easier to find your path. If you're thinking about what's in it for me, selfishness, pursuit of pleasure at all else, right? Only the quick hits. That's where it's harder you end up finding yourself trapped in this individualistic maze of pain like Vader, right? It's all about him. It's all about how he feels. It's not about anybody else.
Yeah.
When we see this mythic storytelling, especially with the addition of the feminine gaze or the other gaze, the non-masculine gaze, applied to the storytelling, it resonates in such a healing and wonderful way.
Yeah. I think of the Matrix, this idea that you one day you wake up and you get this sort of level of enlightenment and illusion falls away and you see like the divisions that separate people and like this sort of that idea of, as you say, dominator culture, like it all just falls away and then you sort of go into deeper levels of that. But it's of course ironic that like certain, political movements have kind of co-opted and bastardized some of that, like that red pill terminology. But like, it's a really beautiful idea that, you can wake up one day and like, you're like, oh, wait, the one is really just all of us, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's cool.
You can wake up one day and choose to live a different life.
Yeah. Yep. That too.
And choose to control your life.
Yeah.
Right? And choose to control anything about your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into Obi-Wan's 3 conversations.
Oh, yeah.
The first is with Leia.
Yep.
Right? Leia's getting ready and she puts on the holster.
Yeah.
Right? She goes and meets and she's like, who are we meeting today? A cousin. And she has these wonderful moments with Bail and her mom. And Bail's like, well, we'll do things differently. Like he's actually going to listen to her. She's guiding a little bit more of her journey because she's been on an adventure where she's grown and she's seen things about the world. And what I love about the holster and the return of Lola is that it's like Obi-Wan and Tala were like her parents. These 2 aspects of herself that were on this journey with her. And now she carries the holster and Lola, which was with Obi-Wan for what he grew as, right? And was returned to her. And now she carries Lola in the holster.
Yeah. I
love that.
I saw the boots in the holster and I thought of, Padme and like Attack of the Clones. I thought of like the boots looking very like they look like Obi-Wan kind of boots, but also, I mean, Han Solo has boots in a holster. Like it's very like
Anakin has boots.
Everybody, it's just like it feels very Leia in all the different ways.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love the moment
like
where
all of these aspects of herself, like she's the fighter, like what, Padme was, but also loves droids like her father does. And yet is also Bail, and Brea, and is also Tala and Obi-Wan, and like is taking all of these good lessons and integrating them into her to keep her whole, right? She's not hiding anything. She's wearing the lessons that she has learned.
Yeah, like accepting the life that her adoptive parents have made for her, but also saying like, but I get to sort of, be me still. Like it's not an either or proposition.
Yeah. It's a middle path. I get to do my journey. I understand I come from the wise, discerning, kind-hearted mom and the passionate, fearless, forthright dad. But I also come from Brea and Bail. And I also come from you, Obi-Wan and Tala. Like I take the lessons and I get to define how I use them. And that's the point. You get to define yourself. You get to define your own journey. Oh,
so good.
So good. And so simple. Like it's just so it's crafted in such a wonderful and glorious way.
One of my favorite little acting beats in the entire episode is, Brea goes, "Is that a holster?" And then you're like, oh, she's gonna like, do the thing that moms do. And she goes, "I love it." And I was like, that's so good. I was like, I love that beat so much. It's
like acceptance of like, you've gone someplace and that's like, as a parent, like speaking as a parent, it's one of the hardest things. Like you have to let your preteens and your teens like be who they are.
Yes.
And sometimes they're like, you're going to wear what, or you're going to do what, or you're into this friend group. And as long as they're being safe and they're making good decisions for themselves, like you have to let them explore themselves and who they want to be.
Yeah.
And they're going to change. It's all a period of change. And so like the holster is like, perfect.
Yeah, so good. I loved that moment.
He comes back to Tatooine and he leaves his cave, which is, of course, metaphorical of the fact that he is no longer in his lowest point, his incubation, his catabasis, right? I talked about this at the first episode that we talked about this. I'm like, he's in his catabasis. You can tell because he's literally in a cave.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But he's packing everything up. He's bringing all of his belongings. This is really symbolic and important because you have to bring the pieces of yourself with you, right? You have to move on. You have to put them in the right place. Maybe he doesn't bring everything. He doesn't bring that one crate that's not useful anymore, the black crate.
Yeah.
Which is very symbolic of Vader.
Looks like Vader's chest plate a little bit.
Yeah. Still in the cave because we know Vader is still in his catabasis, his lowest point.
Yeah.
Dope. He leaves the cave and he's like, oh, he sees the Luke little ship. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go and make sure family unit is okay. He arrives and okay. So I didn't want to talk about it with Leia, but I'm going to talk about it with Luke because Luke is most representative of this, which is because of the line that happens in the first episode where Obi-Wan says, he must be trained. Like, I got to take him from you. Like, this is what I've learned. We got to go and become Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And he 180s that and says, he just needs to be a boy.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to be with you. He's great with you. The future will take care of itself. Okay. This undoes, well, it shows us some healing from the original sin of Star Wars, which is that Anakin was taken from his family, from the compassion cocoon, the protection cocoon of Shmi Skywalker.
Yeah.
And this heals the family unit and breaks the attachment rule.
Yeah, I like this sort of unspoken element of the conversation too, where Owen is sort of like, what are you doing here? Like, you know, he's not happy to see him, and then Obi-Wan is just sort of like, you know, always just sort of like checking up on you guys, making sure everything's okay. That sort of connotation. He has the Skyhopper toy, but it's like he's not gonna like push it. You know, he's not gonna like say like, oh, you know, please give this to him. He's just sort of got it. And it's sort of like, it's all happening like unspoken. And it's, it's very.
And Owen now sees that his intentions are, because he always viewed Obi-Wan as a threat to take his son away from him.
Yeah.
Right?
Understandably.
Lead him down a path that's going to end him like Anakin. And now he sees like, no, I'm not intending to do that. I see now where I was wrong. I see now where the Jedi were wrong. That's the unspoken subtext of this entire friggin' scene.
Yeah.
And he could have taken Leia, he could have taken Luke or convinced them that it was but it's not the right thing to do. They need to learn love and compassion. They need to be loved so that they can love. And attachment and love and emotions are key to understanding and empathizing with others. And then we get the iconic, hello there.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. I cried.
Do you want to meet him? And then that's great. And I think in A New Hope I think they had a real Skyhopper in the garage maybe too that Luke flew like at one point. Maybe I could be wrong about that, but I think they might have had like a real one of those little flyers in the garage.
Oh, like a big one, not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I could be wrong about that. I think you might see an Attack of the Clones too, but maybe that's my imagination. But I like this idea too that like the toy can represent both like real adventure and running off planets to Alderaan and all that stuff in A New Hope, or in contrast to the Call to Adventure, it's just a toy and he's just a kid. Like that's kind of beautifully done.
Yeah, it opens up the possibility for Luke to make his own decisions too.
There you go. Yeah.
Right? That's key. Like that's that's one of the things that we also need to tell others, is that this is open to anyone to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a heroic journey for anyone to take if they want to.
Yeah.
And they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have him go off, and he's heading off to probably build his hut, I assume, right? His house.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Yep.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But he's heading towards the valley, right? The lowest point, the point where water goes.
Sure. Yeah.
And he sees Qui-Gon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, took you long enough.
Yeah. Yeah, they speak sort of in like a very comfortable kind of old friends sort of way. It's sort of like vague dialogue, but like that.
Yeah.
That like
I've been calling you this whole time. You left me on red, but no, it was you weren't ready to see the it's an invisible ink, like that's, and this Master and Apprentice story in a certain point of view is like one of the most amazing stories. It's written by Claudia Gray. And like, it makes me cry every time. And it gets the Force in such a fundamental way. I know I've talked about this, that there's a lot of Claudia Gray in this show. It feels like they understand all of the things that Claudia Gray has created, like with Leia and with Master and Apprentice, both the novel and the short story. But I love that he's like, you're not ready to see, and we have a long way to go, because the journey is not done for Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
He is merely at his apotheosis and understanding the ultimate boon, which is to give hope and mercy to others, not to hold the fact that Reva was a dark side user, to give her mercy, right? To give her compassion, to understand that she has choices to make, and to give that back to her and support her. Like, he's not fully done everything.
Yeah.
And I love that Leia told him to go sleep, so that was really good too. Oh my goodness, this show.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
I mean, I have to rewatch the whole thing as like a complete show, start to finish again, to kind of fully grasp, everything that I love about it. But I mean, it felt, I don't know, so important in terms of like, like
Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars having a future beyond. Boy, I enjoyed like Book of Boba Fett. I enjoy Lego games and Lego sets. It's fun to pick up a Vader comic and see what squid monster he's gonna fight, or what weird cyborg is gonna try to kill him. But like at the end of the day, you want that sense that like, this is all headed somewhere meaningful, and there's a reason to keep telling this story of Star Wars. And like, wow, did that give that to me, in that way that when you're, 7 years old and seeing Return of the Jedi, and, Vader takes off his helmet and he's like a kindly old man all of a sudden, and he's regretful and he loves his son, and Luke does all the things that Luke does in that movie that are so extraordinary and profound. Like, it felt like that movie. It felt like Return of the Jedi, or Attack of the Clones was a big movie for me as a kid. And I don't know. It's rare that something takes you to those heights of like, being 7 or 15, seeing Revenge of the Sith. And like, this show took me back to that, and
it's valuable.
It's good stuff.
And
it really is.
It reiterates so much of what I've talked about on this show, like in deep dive episodes, especially Power of Myth and Symbolism. And it makes me feel seen as a fan. It sounds so weird to say, but like, I still want love and romance in Star Wars. I think it says something different than the love of a brotherly love that we got in Kenobi, and the self-love that we get. But like, if you're going to just tell stories about, integrating and getting to wholeness, like, that's cool. I love it. It's really important. It makes me actually really excited for Andor, because Tony Gilroy, like, he has a plan. That commercial or the trailer looked really great.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. And like to sum this up in like kind of a statement, wholeness is the point of this storytelling. Using the, Deborah Chow close up on the faces to feel the emotions of the character, to be with them, was really, really important, because it shows us that living with integrity, i.e., actively integrating these pieces of ourselves that we've either cut off or ignored or turned into shadows or projected out there, helps us become whole, and understanding that our suffering, we should have, when we are suffering, we should have compassion for others that are suffering. Super important philosophical, psychological, and mythic points in one show.
Yeah.
Wow. It gets it in such a fundamental way. And I'm sure George Lucas is grinning ear to ear.
Yeah, you have to imagine that he would be pretty impressed with this, and like it's pretty easy to relate, for parents probably, but for anyone to see like this version of Obi-Wan recognizing the people that he's lost in Leia, and just realizing like, oh, I care about this girl like so much, and like, that having that like parental love and sort of protection, like instinct or whatever for her, like it gives him like, reason to go on, and to not just to get out of bed in the morning, but to be better, and to sort of like, strive for tomorrow rather than like hide in some cave someplace. I don't know. There's something really beautiful about his sort of dad Obi-Wan mode that he goes into in this show.
Yeah, it really is. And like, what are we fighting for? A better world, a future.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts before we talk about Kenobi 2?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, I guess, I guess the transition point there is just that, if we did have to go down that road, I really like the team of people that were assembled for this. When Deborah Chow's episode 3 of The Mandalorian aired 1,000 years ago, I was like, this is a gift. Like, she's really talented, and I wanted to see more from her. And, here she proved me right on that one. And I just hope that, we get more of her, more Deborah Chow.
In the modern television or streaming show versions of Star Wars, the best episodes have been directed by women.
Yeah. Bryce's Boba episode was also,
Bryce's Boba episode, Stephanie, or the one who did number 2.
Right.
Book of Boba Fett, all of Bryce Dallas Howard's episodes in Mandalorian, and now Deborah Chow. Why? Well, because the Force is feeling. Right? We feel the character's emotions.
Yeah.
And so that needs to be a fundamental part of Star Wars.
Yeah. I think it's really important to keep people in the room who are not like, well, why doesn't he just kill Darth Vader right here? He's Obi-Wan and he's strong. Why doesn't he just kill Darth Vader? You want creators in the room who are going to be able to articulate why you shouldn't just kill Darth Vader and why there are other avenues. There are alternatives to fighting, the galaxy, is working toward peace, ideally, and people are trying to be better, And
we within ourselves, when we can heal ourselves and become whole, we can make others around us and help others around us become whole. Yeah. All right. Obi-Wan Kenobi, no notes, except for 6-7 whole podcasts on Obi-Wan Kenobi. Plus some post Obi-Wan Kenobi content I am planning to record very soon. Dark Feminine, which I already mentioned earlier on in the episode, which will include some Reva stuff, because she's really, really fundamentally important from a fairy tale mythology perspective and what she means in this story, as well as other dark feminine archetypes, which is super exciting for me. I'm going to be doing that with Missy. I'm going to be recording on Obi-Wan Kenobi's whole hero's journey. Really, really important stuff. A ton of stuff on mythology overall will be coming out pretty shortly as well over the course of the summer. Just like doubling down on why mythology is important and what it means. And just with some experts that I recorded with at Celebration, I think that episode is really, really key and wonderful. So that'll be, I believe, coming out next. And then some of these other episodes will be kind of spread throughout the summer. So looking forward to all of that content and getting that out to you. Lots of interesting things to think about over the course of the summer. Before Andor, right?
Yeah.
Excitement. And then Andor. Fun stuff. Well, Alex, this has been a journey.
It's been a lot of fun.
Some of the best fun I've had since Mandalorian season 1.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
Yeah. With you. I mean,
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, thanks for joining me as always and having this awesome discussion with me. And I look forward to having you back in the future.
Sounds
to talk
good.
about more Star Wars.
Yeah.
Where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Mostly on Twitter at Alex J. Kane, Kane.
This wraps up Obi-Wan Kenobi. I hope you all have an exploration of your wholeness after this. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force. Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.